Factors affecting runoff. First one is characteristics of precipitation. In the previous classes, we have learned about the different forms of precipitation. The various forms are rain, snow, hail, etc. So, the precipitation can be either in the form of rain or in the form of snow. Then, if the precipitation occurs in the form of rain, it will immediately produce runoff. But if the precipitation is in the form of snow, it produces runoff much later. We can also say that the runoff increases with increase in intensity of rainfall. That is about the characteristics of precipitation. First, if the precipitation is in the form of rain, immediate runoff is produced, and if the rainfall is having higher intensity, then also we will get greater runoff. Second one is characteristics of drainage basin. So a drainage basin can be either fan shaped. This is a fan shaped catchment, or it can be fern shaped. The drainage basin can be either fan shaped or it can be fern shaped. A fan shaped drainage basin, that is this one, a fan shaped drainage basin produces greater runoff than a fern shaped drainage basin. This is because the fan-shaped drainage basin has tributaries which has greater length compared to that of fern-shaped. The fan-shaped catchment has greater tributaries comparing to the fern-shaped basin. So, a fan-shaped basin produces more runoff. And also, a larger drainage basin with mild rainfall, that means less intensity, the rainfall is having less intensity. A larger drainage basin with mild rainfall produces less runoff because that large basin has larger storage effect, so that runoff reduces. A larger drainage basin, that is, we are assuming a mild rainfall is occurring in a large drainage basin. So if mild rainfall is occurring in a larger drainage basin, the runoff will be less because the large drainage basin has larger storage effect. And if higher intensity rainfall occurs in a smaller drainage basin, if higher intensity rainfall occurs in a smaller drainage basin, then we can say that greater is the runoff. If in a smaller drainage there is high intensity of rainfall, then we can say that more runoff is produced. And also the surface of the drainage basin also has a substantial effect on the runoff. For example, let us compare bare surface and a surface with vegetal covering. So you know the bare surface gives more runoff, but the surface with vegetal covering produces less runoff. It is very clear, that is, the bare surface will give more runoff comparing to an area covered with plants and trees. Then we have learned about windward side and leeward side. That is, when we learn orographic precipitation, we have learned about windward side and leeward side. You know, in the windward side, greater precipitation occurs, so greater will be the runoff on the windward side. On the other hand, if the drainage basin is located in the leeward side, then it receives only lesser precipitation and hence the runoff will be very less because on the windward side precipitation is more, therefore we can get more runoff, while on the leeward side the precipitation is less, so lesser will be the runoff. Similarly, if the drainage basin is located at high altitude, if the drainage basin is located at high altitudes, they receive more precipitation. If the drainage basin is located at high altitude, they receive more precipitation and hence greater is the runoff. Similarly, a steeply sloping drainage basin produces greater runoff comparing to mild slopes. And also, a drainage basin with pervious soil yield less runoff because what happens in pervious soil? Infiltration occurs in pervious soil. So, in pervious soil, the runoff produced will be less. While in case of impervious soil, the runoff produced will be more because in impervious soil there is no infiltration losses. Similarly, if a drainage basin comprises unfissured rock, it produces greater runoff. But if it is having fissured rock means it will be having cracks in between. So what happens is that the amount of precipitation, a little amount of precipitation gets stored in this cracks and openings. Fissured എന്ന് പറയുമ്പോൾ openings ഉണ്ടാവും. So what happens is that in those cracks or in those openings, a little amount of precipitation accumulates. So the runoff will be less. But in case of unfissured rock, if the drainage basin is comprises unfissured rock, then we can produce more runoff. That is about the characteristics of drainage basin. Next one is meteorological characteristics. The runoff is affected by meteorological characteristics like temperature, humidity, wind velocity, pressure variation, etc. If there is high temperature and high wind velocity, let us assume a day having high temperature and high wind velocity. So the losses of water due to evaporation and transpiration will be more. If there is high temperature and high wind velocity, the losses due to evaporation and transpiration will be more. So if the losses due to evaporation and transpiration is more, what happens to the runoff? The runoff decreases. But humidity decreases evaporation and transpiration losses. That is, if there is humidity, the presence of humidity decreases evaporation and transpiration losses. So what happens if the evaporation loss and transpiration loss is less? We can produce more runoff. That is about the meteorological characteristics. And the last one is storage characteristics. That is, you assume the drainage basin is having a large number of storage structures. It can be artificial or it can be natural. If it natural includes depressions, pools, lakes, etc. That is, there may be natural depressions, pools, lakes, etc., which may store a part of water, which may store a part of this precipitation. So the amount of runoff will be less. And also the presence of artificial reservoirs or tanks which store water, which has a greater storage capacity, so they store water. So what happens to the runoff? If there is presence of the storage structures like natural or artificial, it store a greater part of runoff, it store a greater part of precipitation, and therefore the runoff produced will be very less. And if from the storage surface storages, water is released after a long time, that is, if after the precipitation this water is released, മഴയ്ക്ക് ശേഷം ഈ വാട്ടറിനെ റിലീസ് ചെയ്യുകയാണെങ്കിൽ it appears as delayed runoff. That is about storage characteristics. That is, if there is presence of storage structures, it decreases the runoff because a particular amount of precipitation get stored in these structures. They can be artificial or natural. That is about the factors affecting runoff. Okay, thank you.